We're trying to move data around and do it securely.
That's
the
not
only thing all of this is about. Are these things configured properly? Do they have vulnerabilities? What are the assets I have in the cloud? What am I doing about compensating controls? To your point, can I fix the security misconfiguration? Can I patch that server? So we're not saying don't patch. We're not saying don't get your configurations right. We're saying make sure you have a way to close that down so that the window of exploitability, the risk window, is as small as possible. It is really important to remember that in the shared responsibility model of a cloud, that there's a lot of security responsibility that falls on you, the end user or customer of the cloud. And that's really important, is acknowledging what are the gaps that it really isn't scalable for one of the public cloud providers to provide me.
As cloud security practitioners, we have been talking a lot about identity as a new perimeter for cloud, but we may be forgetting something. And I learned this concept called front door versus service door from Brian from Checkpoint, who just came on the show. And that's what this episode is about. Brian has been in the network security space for a long time, started as sysadmin, moved to network security, did about 15 years in network security, and still continues to be in that ground for talking to customers about what is network security's future in the world of cloud. If you have been a network security person like me who probably thought CCNA was the best thing in the world back in the day, and being a firewall person was like the coolest job that you could find on the blue team side, of course, outside of application security. This time we spoke about how the data centers of the old school world, as some of us cloud practitioners may believe, because you and I have been drinking the Kool-Aid for cloud security from the CSPs for a long time. They were talking about how data centers are also catching on the capabilities of what the same cloud providers providing, and how a lot of enterprise who are both hybrid or multi-cloud, they find it challenging being cloud native. All that and a lot more in this episode on how the network security world is evolving for this conversation. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Brian from Checkpoint. If you are here for a second and third time, if you enjoy conversations like these, if you know someone who is in the network security space looking for what does their future look like in the world of cloud and multi-cloud and AI, definitely share this episode with them. As always, I'll appreciate if you give us a follow, subscribe if you're listening to this audio episode, or if you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, definitely give us a subscribe and follow. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you next one. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast at AWS Inforce. I've got Brian. Thank you for coming on the show, Brian.
Thanks, Ashish.
Maybe to kick off the conversation, if you can tell us a bit about yourself, your professional journey, and get straight into it.
I affectionately refer this time at Checkpoint as the third act in my career. I started, my first decade was in IT. I started in desktop support like so many, moved up to sysadmin and then network operations, security operations roles. From there, I actually got an opportunity to join F5 as a sales engineer, and found out that sales engineers are some of the most technical human beings on the planet. And I spent almost 15 years at F5, finishing my time there as the VP of product management for all their web app firewall and API security. Feeling like I stuck my flag in the mountain there, I ventured out to seek my next opportunity. And I really wanted to get back to be customer facing, and I wanted to go to a cybersecurity company first and foremost, because that's my passion. Checkpoint has this tremendous growth strategy for leveraging the cloud first and foremost. And I really love what they're doing in terms of how they're taking CNAPP to a different place. And so I'm leading sales, engineering, and customer success at Checkpoint now. Been at it for about 6 weeks. So don't quote me on everything I say.
We'll try. But I think your sysadmin background is an interesting one, because for me, the memory of initial starting in IT was the whole firewall certification. Getting a CCNP, Checkpoint firewall, like that used to be the jam back in the day. And now somehow, because now we live in the cloud world, a lot has changed. And I'm also curious, because you've spent such a long time in that network security space, way longer than I have as well. How have you seen the transition of networking as it used to be, and how networking is today between cloud and hybrid world we live in?
Yeah, networking used to be, if you locked down the network, you were secure. Because that was the front door to everything. And then what happens is that attackers figure out that, hey, I've got to move on to the next softest target. So they're moving up the stack to the API, they're moving up the stack to web applications in particular. No longer were they just knocking for open ports on the network. So things changed there. And then we had, coinciding with this, the massive movement to the cloud. There was the promise of faster time to market, more agility, cost savings, all the public cloud promised in spades, and in many cases delivered. But with the public cloud, with the move to a new data center paradigm, came new security challenges that I think only recently are we really taking head on and really addressing in a meaningful way.
We've been consuming a lot of the cloud Kool-Aid for some time. It's like, okay, I was at least 10 plus years. And I somehow forgot what the on-premise world looks like sometimes, unless I have a conversation with an enterprise. I'm like, oh yeah, that used to be a thing. Because we were talking about this, that the on-premise has been keeping up as well. How has the on-premise network space changed now?
They've been observing what the public clouds are doing, right? And in many cases, they're looking at their cloud spend and going, maybe I'm not saving quite as much money as I thought I would. And can we adopt cloud concepts in the modern data center? And absolutely they can. And they can get that agility from automation and orchestration, the efficiencies of things, leveraging containers in particular. Containers, I feel, are really delivering on things that virtual machines endeavor to, but never quite got to. So there's a lot of more possibility now. If you're designing a new data center from scratch, you can design it with cloud concepts in mind, taking all the lessons that Azure and AWS and Google learned for us and applying them from scratch. And so there's a real opportunity to save time, money, everything else by implementing some of the cloud concepts on-prem. And that's important because, as we know, some data can't move out of the data center.
Yeah, and I think some of the biggest challenges, we talk about data sovereignty, I think you mentioned. For me, it's like, not every cloud has a data center everywhere, but data centers have existed for so long everywhere. It's not that IT today is starting today or 10 years ago, IT's been there for a while. And that to me is also, as you said that, I'm like, oh, does that mean all the cloud service providers of the world are getting competition from the existing data centers now because they have equal capability? And if they already have the customer in the data center, the customer will really struggle to justify, why am I moving to a cloud? Which kind of brings me to what happens to network security people. Like what's happening in that transition between the on-premise and now to hybrid world? What's their challenge?
Network security people are trying to figure out, because they're responsible for security everywhere, not just in the on-prem data centers. How do I secure the network in the cloud? How do I keep applications, data segmented properly? And oftentimes they're finding that either they didn't know they had other options, so they go with the cloud native network security tools, or they found more often than not that app dev, DevOps has said, I've deployed an app and the network security tools I could call by API are the cloud native tools. So that something's been selected, and then they have to figure out, can they consume this operationally, which is a challenge because they got to learn a whole new set of tools for network security. Do these network security tools in the cloud native world meet the standard that I'm accustomed to? Does it have all the features, functionality, protocol support? And then once they made that assessment, does it do everything I needed to do? Can I consume it operationally? Oftentimes they're falling back and say, no. Right? They're saying it doesn't meet my standards, or I can't consume this operationally, and they search for another solution.
And because we were talking about conversations in customers around who are from that network security background, talking about how they are tackling cloud and some of their challenges. You kind of mentioned that the cloud space is limited, but they have that whole CNAPP tool that they've been talking about for a while. And so where do you see that the gap that we are referring to? And what does CNAPP do, as to your point, for the network security part of the world? And where is the gap at the moment?
So a lot of the third-party cloud security tools, first of all, exist because of hybrid and multi-cloud, right? I can't have the same security tools everywhere if I'm relying on Azure's native tools or AWS's native tools. So that's one thing, right? So CNAPP does three things in particular. It does identity and entitlement management, which is important, knowing who gets access to what and where. The cloud workload protection, which is monitoring the workloads and the data moving in and out of a workload. And then security posture management, CSPM, which is probably the one that most people are concerned with. Are these things configured properly? Do they have vulnerabilities? What are the assets I have in the cloud? But all of these things amount to essentially inventory, not control. They tell us what we have, which is very important. That's the building blocks of good security operations. What do I have? Then how do I protect it? What's my attack surface? So CNAPP does a great job of that. And it gives you a view that's cloud independent. You can have one dashboard that says, here's my security posture and my assets everywhere across all my clouds, public, private, you name it. But then the question comes, how do I prevent these things from being exploited? And that's really the thing that's got me excited at Checkpoint, is they've integrated CNAPP into their network security and their web app firewall solutions, making it possible to take the context that we learned with CNAPP and then provide prevention and protection so those things do not get exploited.
I don't think we talk about prevention enough. You talk about, I think one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is also the fact that a lot of the focus for when we talk about CSPM, CNAPP is like, hey, if I close that misconfiguration, I'm secure. But to your point, a lot of times it can't be done straight away. I have to wait for someone in dev or somewhere else to fix that for me, pick that ticket up and go, okay, this is important. Or someone else, it's been like a political effort to even get that to be closed. In the meanwhile, what we were doing in network security in the on-premise days was like, oh, if there's a 0-day or if there's another vulnerability, there's a way to prevent that from being exploited. So you're saying, I guess the way you're seeing a path forward could also be the fact that, hey, it could be CNAPP with that additional capability of what networking has been for us in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I were talking before, we've gotten really good at network security. That's the good news in cybersecurity. We've gotten really good at it. It's very hard to penetrate networks if you have the right tools in place. So part of that, get those tools in place. But then what am I doing about compensating controls? To your point, can I fix the security misconfiguration? Can I patch that server? Or is that going to take some time and I have a compensating control at the edge that can close it rather quickly while I have time? So we're not saying don't patch. We're not saying don't get your configurations right. We're saying make sure you have a way to close that down so that the window of exploitability, the risk window, is as small as possible.
From a CNAPP perspective, and from bringing that to the edge with the WAF, as well as anything which is like edge facing, for lack of a better word, what are some of the things, maybe for CISOs who are probably listening to this conversation, or leaders who are thinking about this as, I do this already. Like, I think what would be different if I'm using like an AWS provider versus, say, another provider? Like, why would I switch between the two?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One, I get dashboard fatigue, right? I talked about consuming cloud native security tools from AWS or Azure operationally, right? It may not be that there's a deficiency there. It may just be, man, I got to learn a whole new set of workflows. I got another dashboard to go to. That's really, at the end of the day, that makes it harder to detect threats and attacks because I'm trying to bounce around. I might be using the SIEM tool to aggregate event information. What we offer at Checkpoint with CloudGuard and CloudGuard Network Security is one dashboard to rule them all, right?
Yeah.
The proverbial single pane of glass, which I don't love that term because it's been promised many times and not delivered. But what we're saying is if you've got an on-prem, like hardware, software-based Checkpoint quantum firewall that you've trusted for many years to do exactly what a stateful network firewall, which by the way, Checkpoint invented the stateful network firewall.
Oh, really? I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, so its genesis is with the founders of Checkpoint. Once you've trusted that for years, you want those same workflows, you want those same set of capabilities in the cloud. We can do that with CloudGuard Network Security. And it's one dashboard you log into, you can see what your network security posture is across all your different environments in one place. And the same goes for our web app firewall. It can be deployed on-prem, can be deployed in your cloud, or it can be deployed as a service. But in the end of the day, same dashboard, one place to rule all your things.
Yeah.
But also, more importantly, the detection and protection posture is the same. The behavior is the same. So if I've got a false positive one place, I know it's going to behave the same in another place. That's not a great example because it's a negative, but I also know that if I'm going to protect it here, it's also going to be protected over there.
Yeah.
Now, the second point beyond dashboard fatigue and new operational processes is vertical integration, right? It's this virtuous loop that we want to create between CNAPP and these edge protection tools. If it's detected by one of the CNAPP tools, how do we automatically protect it in the WAF or automatically protect it in the CloudGuard network firewall? And that's something that we're already offering some of today, and we're going to continue to embellish that. And this is all, as you can imagine, driven by AI.
Yeah.
But we offer push button manual intervention so that you don't have to necessarily trust Skynet to secure the network. We give you the tooling to say, all right, there's a suggestion here. Hey, we've detected this vulnerability, it's part of this application network flow. Would you like to mitigate it over here on your web app firewall? Imagine the day Log4 Shell came out and somebody said, where are you vulnerable? You probably don't know, right? That's where your CNAPP tool comes in. It's telling me, where am I vulnerable to this latest thing? And then figure out, all right, what are the paths to that vulnerability? Is it exploitable? And then how do I patch it? How do I either patch it at the server or at the edge? And so this kind of automation and this kind of integrated, orchestrated workflow is really promising for cutting down that risk window to the minimum possible. Log4Shell is not the best example when it comes to Checkpoint, because if you had our WAF deployed, you would have been protected on 0 day because it's incredibly advanced. One of the reasons I'm also at Checkpoint is I dedicated most of my career at F5 to web app firewall and API security. And the product they have over here, the service for the web app firewall and the API security, has blown me away in terms of what it can do on a 0 day.
So we talk about identity is the most important parameter in cloud, but we exclude one obvious thing in there, that most organizations these days have applications that face the internet. And 9 or 10 times, those applications are not using the identity that is people like you and I who work for as the employer of the company. It's usually customers.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, it's usually a WAF or an API gateway, or it's one of those ones and in a lot of ways, I think the reason I was excited is because we kept ignoring that component. Now, thanks to the AI world, with API being more attentive, and now suddenly applications are being more data coming in conversation as well, there's a lot more conversations about edge security coming in. So for people who probably have been very cloud first and probably created a lot of custom dashboards because the native ones for not providing it. Like I know AWS WAF, Azure WAF, but if you take whichever WAF you want, you have to build your own dashboard to even see what are you getting, customization to even add, hey, whenever this happens, do this action kind of a thing as well.
Yeah.
Which usually is not a problem with a vendor product as well. So for people who have been cloud native for a while and are large tech enterprise as well, is there a obvious thing you see there that needs to change from an edge security perspective they're probably missing? Because I get your point about the 0-day part. Is there something that you're noticing in that space where, hey, if you're cloud only, you probably don't have to worry about this, or probably have to worry from perspective that it is no transition. But if you're hybrid, then you probably need to have this conversation about identity as well as the edge security as that future. Where do you see these worlds go?
There's two edges. There's the front door, the internet facing, and then there's the service door, right? Where even identities can be compromised, right? So even you and I are working as a contractor inside the IT organization, and I'm sloppy with my credentials, or I get mad because my contract didn't get renewed.
Yeah.
Now I'm the disgruntled insider, or I'm just a full-on insider threat. I'm a spy. I'm conducting espionage. So identity is definitely the most important perimeter, but it certainly is not foolproof. And that's in the cases where you can assert identity, and that's mostly on the internal side. On the external, we want our internet-facing applications to be free and easy, right?
Yeah.
We want to be able to access them without logging in.
Yeah.
APIs are particularly notorious for this. They're often unauthenticated whatsoever. So that's where you see gateways coming in and authentication gateways coming in front of the API to provide something that wasn't built in by the developers. Identity is great, but it isn't always there. And still, you need additional layers of security. Again, compensating controls. This is security 101 stuff, but it is really important to remember that in the shared responsibility model of a cloud, that there's a lot of security responsibility that falls on you, the end user or customer of the cloud.
Yeah.
They don't do everything, right? They walk you 24 miles of the marathon. You got to get that last 2.2, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really important, is acknowledging, what are the gaps that it really isn't scalable for one of the public cloud providers to provide me.
This has been interesting, because I think I'm glad I'm able to shed some light on this as well. So maybe where do you see the future go with this as well? That's the final question.
I think we're going to see more convergence, right? We're going to see, and by that I mean, we're going to see more on-premises data centers start to look like cloud, more cloud data centers to have public cloud providers have more advanced security tools to try to keep pace. But I think there is a cutoff line for the public cloud provider to say, again, in that shared responsibility model, what is it scalable for me to provide versus what I should expect the tenant or the customer to provide? So we're going to see a lot of consolidation too in the security space. We have a lot of point solution tools out there right now. CNAPP is particularly in this space and has been, and you're starting to see a lot of the CNAPP vendors get acquired, but we're going to continue to see that convergence. We're also seeing the big vendors looking at not just CDN now, but MCN, multi-cloud networking, to provide more advanced tools than just a CDN can provide. And then your convergence even there with web app and API security coming together. WAF and API security are becoming blurry one thing, which is good, because a lot of the API security solutions we see today are, again, a news engine. It tells me what APIs I have, and it tells me what they're vulnerable to, but it doesn't provide me enforcement because they tend not to be in line. So that's a good thing. If a WAF is consuming API security and bringing that into its capabilities, now you have an enforcement engine, not just a news engine.
That was like the technical questions. I have 3 fun questions for you as well. First one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not trying to solve network security problems of the world?
Of late, I am trying to deal with the fact that I have 2 sons. One just graduated college, and the other one just finished his first year majoring in computer science.
Oh, wow.
So it's a big transition for my wife and I to navigate life with grown children.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So we're trying to find new hobbies. And to that end, I started to learn to play guitar, teach myself to play guitar.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not very good yet.
Right.
But it is something I spent some time on. And then I love to travel. One of the things I love about being in sales is it provides a lot of opportunity to see the world. And with my kids grown, my wife and I, if I'm traveling for business, she's traveling for business, we accompany one another and extend the trips. So travel is a big part of life.
Awesome. And second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
Proud of my marriage. I've been married 22 years.
Oh, wow.
And my wife, Leah, and I are just as strong as ever. And I'm really proud of that.
I'll make sure I clip this for her to see it. Get you some downy points in there as well. Final question, what is your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share with us?
As a traveler of the world, I love to sample everything. I'm an adventure eater, if you will, but to pick one favorite is very difficult. But I'd have to say, if I desert island pick, I can only have one cuisine forever, it'd probably be Japanese.
Oh, nice.
And that's a bit of a cheat, because I can go everywhere from hibachi and teriyaki all the way through katsu and sushi and everything else.
Right.
So you got a nice smorgasbord there.
Yeah.
range of different things that you can sample with Japanese cuisine.
Japanese is a good choice as well. But now, where can people find you on the internet and connect with you on talking about more about the space?
So I'm on LinkedIn, as I mentioned. BA McHenry is my handle on there. So LinkedIn URL/BA McHenry is where I'm at. And I'll share my talks on there when they're recorded. Oftentimes, like I shared this week, that I'm going to be at Reinforce. So if folks want to find me,
I'll put these in the show notes as well, but thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. We have been running for the past 5 years, so I'm sure we haven't covered everything cloud security yet. And if there's a particular cloud security topic that we can cover for you in an interview format on Cloud Security Podcast, or make a training video on tutorials on Cloud Security Bootcamp, definitely reach out to us on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. By the way, if you're interested in AI and cybersecurity, as many cybersecurity leaders are, you might be interested in our sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which I run with former CSO of Robinhood, Caleb Seamer, where we talk about everything AI and cybersecurity. How can organizations deal with cybersecurity on AI systems, AI platforms, whatever AI has to bring next as an evolution of ChatGPT and everything else continues. If you have any other suggestions, definitely drop them on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. I'll drop that in the description and the show notes as well, so you can reach out to us easily. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Peace.